Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for our webinar about the community eligibility provision to talk about direct certification and reporting requirements. My name is Heather Hopwood, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Joe Templin and Ann McMahon. The slides for today's webinar are available in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and you can access them by clicking on the icon that looks like three little pieces of paper. As the operator mentioned, today's webinar is also being recorded. It'll be available on our website, and we'll give you that website address a little later in the webcast when we talk about resources. So you know what to expect over the course of the next hour. Here's the information we'll be providing. We'll talk through some basics about how community eligibility and direct certification are related. And during this discussion, we'll also highlight some of the differences between how the identified student percentage and the direct certification performance rates are calculated and what students are included in each of those formulas. Then I'll turn it over to Joe, who some of you have worked with, to talk a little bit more about direct certification and highlight some best practices. And then Ann will walk through some of the reporting requirements for the FNS-742 and 834 forms. Finally, we'll have some time at the end for questions. We'll be taking typed-in questions via the webinar function so that we have a log of the Q&As. What this means is that you don't have to hold your questions until the end of the presentation. You can type them in at any time throughout the webinar, and then we'll answer as many as we can verbally during the Q&A period. You can ask questions by typing on the Q&A tab at the top of the screen, and you'll get a little text box where you can type your question in. So we have a lot of information to cover. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we dive into talking about direct certification, we want to talk about the link between community eligibility and direct certification and describe some of the differences. The link between CEP and direct certification is important because direct certification systems that are more accurate or make more matches mean that CEP schools can maximize their identified students and their claiming percentages. In CEP, the identified students include students that are directly certified with SNAP and also other directly certified and categorically eligible students, such as those directly certified with TANF or homeless, migrant, and runaway students. Basically, any student certified for free meals without a household application and not subject to verification. In most, if not all cases, students directly certified with SNAP will be the largest subset of identified students, but other categories are included in the identified students group. In contrast, the direct certification performance rate is based on students directly certified with SNAP. Here's the math behind the identified student percentage and the direct certification performance rate. The ISP is the number of identified students divided by the number of enrolled students, and the direct certification performance rate is the number of students directly certified using SNAP divided by the school-aged children in SNAP households. And Ann will explain this formula in a little more detail later in the presentation. This table gives you an idea of which students are included in each calculation. For CEP and the identified student percentage, students are included if their information or they're certified for free meals without the use of a household application. And again, they're not subject to verification. And the direct certification performance rate is really based on the number of matches with SNAP. So now I'll turn it over to Joe Templin to talk more about direct certification and share some best practices.
Thank you, Heather. Today I'm going to talk about some best practices that we have picked up during our direct certification training and technical assistance visits on site with states. This is going to both include recommendations that we have made when we have identified systems and reviewed systems, as well as best practices that we've learned from state agencies, and as well as LEAs in our discussions in situations where LEAs have local matching. Some of these ideas are going to be more helpful than others, and that's going to be dependent upon how your state system is run. And although when we go out and do our direct certification TTA visits, our desire is to optimize your system for the SNAP DC rate, I think you'll find that a lot of what we talk about today will be synonymous with DC for the purpose of your CEP ISP. So I'd like to begin with talking about complete student data files, the information that's in your system available for matching. The importance here is to get the entire universe of students that's available to you. So that often is going to depend upon the timely student information system updates that you have. This, of course, is not always going to be something that you are going to be able to control, but working with your SIS side and having those schedules which make students available for you for matching up into those deadlines is very important. You want to make sure that regardless of the update schedules that locals have to put into your SIS, that you're ensuring that they're keeping these schedules. So even though you may not be responsible for this data, you as the child nutrition side does have an interest in making sure that those LEAs are maintaining a schedule and the most current information is coming up into your SIS system if that is what you are matching against. In a lot of situations, we come across states in which the SIS may be only updated maybe 3 times a year, or it's updated not until later in the year, so you have a lot of stale data. What we talk about is the option for the locals, the LEAs, to be able to throw information against a district-wide matching list. So they're going up and they're looking with their local information and throwing against a statewide SNAP system. So what this allows is for them to use their real-time data at their local system against the statewide SNAP data versus having to rely on an SIS schedule, which may be a couple of months old at the time of the matching. So again, when we're looking at complete student data files, what we want to do is make sure that when we are matching, we are matching against the entire universe of students that are in that school. The other aspect to that, of course, if we're looking at a complete universe of students, is that we want to also make sure that our SNAP data is going to be as current as possible. The best way to ensure this is to ensure that our SNAP files are being received daily. This, of course, is going to be dependent upon the system that your SNAP agency has. So if you're able to get daily files from them, if you're not getting them now, what you would probably want to do is have that discussion and see if their system can make those daily files accessible to you, because that's going to give you the most accurate data, and it's also going to give you the most records that are going to be available for you to match against. If you are unable to get daily SNAP files, one of the things that we also talk about is supplemental files. So although you may be getting, say, files on a monthly basis, we know for the DC rate, which operates off the last operating day in October, we would request that the child nutrition side receives a SNAP file somewhere in the middle of the month of October, and for the CEP, you'd want to look for one that's towards the middle of March for your April counts. That will allow you to get some additional SNAP records for kids that went on SNAP during that final month, but who in a monthly SNAP file availability would not be made available to you for matching to the following month. So if you are going to get a supplemental file, and say you are on a monthly system, what you want to do is also look at the life cycle of how long it takes you to get that SNAP file for you to run your match, for you to send the information to a local, and to have the local then process it in order to get into their POS as a direct certification. So if you're looking at providing a supplemental file up and towards that last possible day, say like a March 27th, 28th, but they're unable to actually go through that information for another several weeks, then it's not going to help you. So you're going to want to look and say, what is my life cycle of getting SNAP files, matching lists out to a local, and a local into a POS, and back it from there and say, okay, this is the date that we would provide a supplemental file. So that, of course, would be something that you would look at if you are unable to get timely SNAP data in a daily file. Okay. Next, we talk about improved SNAP data. So one of the very simple things that you can do is you can look at your age range. We have been to places in which they're receiving SNAP records in a 5 to 17 age range. Well, what we know is that there are probably kids in your school that are less than 5 years old, or that they are older than 17 years old. And if you're limiting your age range, you are not getting access to that SNAP record to be able to match against somebody. So the first thing you want to do is take a look and say, what is our actual age range of kids that are in our schools, and make sure that SNAP is providing you with a data file that meets that age range. The other thing that we would look at is grabbing additional data fields from SNAP. So this is where it becomes very important to talk to SNAP and understand what your SNAP agency has. So if you can get additional information, even if it's not information that may be in your algorithm for matching, that information may be passed on to locals where they go through looking at potential and non-matches, because it's additional information they can look at. So say your system, your algorithm doesn't match on parent last name, but SNAP has that parent's last name, and they're able to flow that information back to you, and then you pass it through to a local. That's information that they can use in doing human adjudication of non-matches. And we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about working non-matches. And what this will also do is help you with extended eligibility, because you will be able to see additional information in those SNAP records that may not be available to you in your algorithm. One thing to also remember is, though, that SNAP in your state may be limited into the information that they pass on to you based upon state regulations and requirements. A compiled SNAP data list. What you want to think about is capturing a list of individuals or students who are on SNAP during that year free for benefits. Because what we have found is that those states, those SNAP agencies, which provide snapshots in time for matching, if you're matching on that list and your LEA is not accessing that list at that time, you have a possibility that you're losing matches. What a compiled list does is ensure that if there is a human event in which in which your LEA is required to take action to run the match, if they come off of SNAP and the match is run the next day, they're going to miss that student. So what you want to make sure what you're doing is you're compiling lists, and as individuals come onto SNAP, that list is maintained so that when an LEA matches, they're matching against a complete list of students. What this is going to do, of course, is it's going to give you insurance against human error. Next, we would say communicate with your SNAP partners. One of the things that we found is that some of our visits that we go on is that it may be the first time that the individuals are in the room together. SNAP agencies obviously update their systems, they update their capabilities, information that they're grabbing. And it's important for you as a child nutrition side is to know what their system is capable of doing. A lot of times we'll see memorandums of understanding for the data partnership agreements to be several years old and don't reflect the current needs of the child nutrition side. So I would suggest that you meet with your SNAP partners, at least a couple times a year to see what their system is capable of and see what fields that they can provide to you. We've been in situations where people are getting monthly matching lists, and the SNAP agency will say, well, we could provide that to you on a daily basis if needed. So just that communication there, obviously, in a very simple way, approved the capability to match students in that state. Next, we're going to talk about the non-match list availability. We found that a lot of states are not currently having their LEAs work non-match lists or may not be providing a non-match list. And depending on the strictness of your algorithm, this can be very important. We know, if we talk about direct cert rate, that it is virtually impossible to get to that 95% benchmark without working a non-match list. And you would also think that, if you're not using a non-match list, that for your CEP, ISP, you're probably losing a lot of students if the LEA is unable to do any type of human adjudication at the local level. So the first thing you want to do is you want to look at your non-match list availability and what's being done with it. First, you need to understand its use and impact. And what I mean by that is if you do currently provide a non-match list or you are thinking about doing it, you have to understand how is that local agency going to use it. We were recently in a state in which an LEA told us that their non-match list was over 5,000 kids. Well, you have to assume that if a school is receiving a non-match list of over 5,000 kids, that more than likely they're not doing much with it. One of the ways that you can overcome this deficiency is by doing probability scoring. If you have an algorithm that will provide to you the possibility that let's say 80% possibility that this student is a match, but we don't identify them as a match because we can't ensure that, you could easily sort that, and LEAs can look at that from top to bottom and say, I'm going to identify and put my resources into the top third scoring to see if those kids are actually my kids. We've seen this done at a local level, and we've seen this done at a state level, and it's very effective because you can actually, easily eyeball as you go through and through human adjudication, identify these kids just through the probability of the algorithm identifying potential matches. Train LEA staff. If you're providing a non-match list or a probabilistic or a probable match list, make sure that you're training LEA staff. What we found in what we do in the afternoons on our visits is we talk to LEAs, is that a lot of the LEAs, although they're receiving them, they don't really know what to do with it, and they don't know how to sort it properly, and they don't know how to take it and put it into their system. So what I would suggest is that if you have a non-match list, if you have a potential match list, don't make an assumption that people are actually using it or they know what to do with it. Make sure that is an important training component. Again, there is a lot of kids that can be picked up through this avenue, and it's a very easy way to find and identify additional direct certifications in your system. Next, we would ask you to consider the on-screen format. What we've seen in a few places is that they're providing a non-match list, but the format and the way it's laid out is not easy to use by the user. So when you develop an on-screen format for a non-match or a potential match list, run it through some LEAs, a focus group, and say, look at what we've provided here. How would you use this? How would you improve it? One of the states that we went to had an on-screen format for a non-match list, but you could easily tell that it was kind of difficult to use, and that probably a lot of LEAs were not using it or not using it to its fullest capabilities just because of the format. And finally, analyze your non-matches. This would be a longer-term goal, but your goal obviously is to identify as many matches as possible. If you're coming up with a match rate that you believe is lower than best for your state, look at the non-matches and go through an analysis and identify why are we not matching on certain kids. and there may be something with your algorithm that needs to be changed. Next, we'll talk about a single student lookup. We would recommend that if you do not have this capability, to look into a single student lookup. And this is the ability for a LEA to simply go online, and whether a kid is coming in at a time, transferring in, to look into the system and see if they are a SNAP recipient or a foster care recipient or a TANF recipient. It's like a one-stop shopping. It's also a way for LEAs to work non-matches. And this is where I talked a little earlier about SNAP pass-through fields. One of the most effective things in a single student lookup is to capture those SNAP pass-through fields, which you as a state may not be utilizing in your algorithm, but could be passed through in a single student lookup in order to find some additional matches. One of the big things is a case number. You won't utilize a case number in your algorithm, most likely from SNAP, but the ability for someone to come in with an application with a SNAP case number on it and to simply go into your child nutrition portal and type in that case number and match it against a SNAP master file to find that kid is a quick and easy way to move that kid from application to a direct certification. So that's something you may want to look at. And of course, you have a single student lookup. Make sure you train your LEA staff on how to use it, its full capabilities, so that they're using it to optimize those direct certifications. The next thing is make matching seamless. I know we've talked a lot about DC with SNAP, but if you are matching with or have access to, say, foster care files, which we have seen in an increasing rate, the best thing to do with that is to utilize a seamless system so that whether you're doing a state match or you're doing a local match, that all the information is on the same file and they're not required to run multiple matches or download multiple files. It becomes one-stop shopping, and you ensure that there's no human attrition in the absence of downloading a file. And that's where we talk about combined files. Even if this information is coming from 2 or 3 different agencies, the ability to grab those files and make it into a combined match file for use by a local, by the LEA. Another thing is, and this seems very simple, but we would ask that you communicate with your LEA partners. For those states who we have visited, I think they would probably agree that one of the most interesting and valuable part of our visit is the LEA portion when we have 3 or 4 LEAs come in, talk about how they do direct certification. And it's always very interesting that there may be an assumption by you as a state agency that LEAs are doing X, Y, and Z because that's what we train on and that's what the manual is. But actually, when you get down to them, they're not doing what you think they're doing, or they're not aware of what's available. And there also is, of course, valuable information that your LEA can pass on to you as to how they actually operate their system that will help you make enhancements and adjustments to your system. What we have always suggested is to have focus groups, take 4, 5, 6 of your LEAs and meet in person a couple times a year and ask them, what are you guys doing? What do you do with the system? We've added this, this, and this. Is it helpful? What do you hear from people, your fellow LEAs, that they're doing? It's a quick way. It also keeps you in touch with your LEAs, and it makes them know that they are part of the system as well. And the last thing is available resources. You can always perform a state self-assessment that's available on the partner web. If you've done a CIP, that's the form that's the tool that's included with the CIP. It'll run you through your system to identify deficiencies. you also have the opportunity to request a DC Training and Technical Assistance Team site visit where we come out for a day and we'll run through your system. We'll make recommendations, and we of course will take information from you and pass it on to other states. That's been one of the most valuable parts is we see a lot of good things and we're able to make those recommendations to other locations. We're still available throughout this year until through August. We still have some availability with our contractor. It's not a management evaluation. It is totally a consultation visit. And finally, I would say always read the Match the Meal newsletter. I think it's currently rated as the #1 quarterly direct certification newsletter in the country, so that may be something of interest to you. So to become a reader, we have a lot of information on there about improving your matching system, your direct certification system, and we are also beginning to now add some stuff that's more CEP specific. Our last edition, we had some information about Hawaii's seamless foster care system, and we'll have more stuff in the future, which will be more CEP specific for you. So I would recommend always grabbing it, and it comes out quarterly, and the next one will release about on or about April 1st. And if you have any ideas for the newsletter or want to tell us about anything, you can always let us know as well. Okay? That's the end of my portion, and I would at this time like to throw it over to Ann, who's going to talk about reporting requirements for the FNS-742 and the FNS-834.
Thanks, Joe. And I want to give a plug for Joe's newsletter. It's pretty great, easy to read information, really informative. Okay, so this section of the webinar will focus on how to accurately report the CEP data on the 2 forms that are used to calculate the direct certification performance rate. Those forms are the FNS-742 and the FNS-834. Hopefully by the end of this section, you will know which students to report on which forms and when. Okay. So first let's start with clarifying the 3 data elements that get used in your direct certification performance rate calculation. As Heather mentioned earlier, the DC rate is calculated by basically taking all the students that are or could be directly certified with SNAP and dividing that total by the number of school-age children in households that receive SNAP benefits. You multiply that by 100 and you get your percent. These 3 essential data elements are collected on the FNS-742 and the 834. I will refer to them going forward as data element 1 from the 742 and data element 2 and 3 from the FNS-834. So the formula is here, a little bit more detailed than what you saw earlier, so that you can have a good idea of the 3 components and where they come from. Okay, I'm going to start with some basic information about the data collection form. The FNS-742, the SFA Verification Collection Report. It collects student and school data reflective of the last day of October, the last operating day of October of that school year. Many of you know that this form probably lived through it. This form was revised last school year, 2013-14, and a couple of the big changes are highlighted here. That it includes the collection of information regarding alternative provisions, including a breakout of CEP, and it also breaks out information about students that were certified with SNAP. And the other big change was that the reporting procedure changed to be reported in FIPRS now, the Food Program Reporting System. The due dates are listed here. LEAs are to get their data to the state agencies by February 1st, and state agencies are to have the information submitted to FNS by March 15th. So here's a screenshot of the 742 paper form. Not what it will look like on the in FIPRS, but for illustration purposes, I use the screenshot here. So what CEP data needs to be reported on the 742? In Section 1, you see that all SFAs must complete this section. The total schools and institutions and the students in Section 1-1 A and B, respectively, where the first arrow is. And in the lower section, 2, all SFAs, Section 2, all SFAs with some or all schools operating under an alternative provision must report here. And you'll see line 2-3 of Section 2, where the second yellow arrow is, and that is where the CEP is broken out. Here, you would report the number of schools operating CEP and the number of students enrolled in those schools in boxes A and B, respectively. This data will be reflective of the last operating day of October. I'm pointing this out just because that's where CEP reports on the 740. CEP schools or SFAs would report on the 742. This data here on the 742 for CEP does not impact your direct certification rate. So where do you report the distinct number of CEP students that are direct certification matches? You don't report them anywhere on the 742. What is reported on the 742 is data element 1 for direct certification. This is the actual directly certified students. Their meal, the students that you are reporting in this box of Section 3, line 3-2B, number 1, those students, their meal is completely dependent on their direct certification match against SNAP records. You're not putting in any students here who are just a match that contribute to calculating your ISP or anything like that. Their meals are dependent on the total and they get reported elsewhere. It's a major distinction to remember here that these in box 3-2B of the 742 are only the students that are directly certified and their meal is completely dependent on that match there. So again, I'm just going to stress that no CEP students get added in here. Okay, so I'm going to move on to where your CEP students do go. They get added to the FNS-834. So here's some basic information about the 834, the State Agency Direct Certification Data Element Report. On the FNS-834, the SNAP and NSLP state agencies submit their data independently through the FIPRS system. Data element number 2, the SNAP state agency submits on the SNAP OP FNS-834, and this includes the number of school-age children between the ages of 5 and 17 in SNAP households receiving benefits anytime during July, August, or September of that school year. This is an unduplicated count. That is, if the child is recorded as being in a household receiving benefits for all 3 months, the child is only counted once here. And data element number 3 of the FNS-834 is where the SNAP, or the, is where the NSLP state agency submits the number of schools, the number of students enrolled in provision schools operating in a non-base year, plus the number of CEP students that are matched against SNAP records. So this is where you're going to include your CEP students. If not for attending a special provision school, either the Provision 2 or 3 or CEP school, these students would otherwise be directly certified through SNAP and be counted on the 742 line 3-2B. But because they are not specifically dependent upon receiving their meal by that SNAP direct certification match, they get counted in here on data element number 3. These forms are due December 1st of each year. However, because of the transition to FIPPers this year, we allowed for an extension so that people could get registered in FIPPers and get their data in. So this year, these forms are due March 1st and actually March 2nd because the 1st is a Sunday. So when this data is submitted, the FNS-834 in FIPPers, you're choosing fiscal year 14, and that is for school year 14-15. We're going to have a screenshot of this later, so you don't have to try and remember all this. So, on the child nutrition, the CN FNS-834, data element number 3, what counts for that? We know that data element 1 is from the 742, which is reflective of October data, and data element 2 is the SNAP data, reflective of July, August, and September. And here's what counts for data element 3. Students matched against SNAP records that are A, enrolled in a special provision school operating in a non-base year. The SFAs would count those students matched against SNAP records in or near October, but no later than the last operating day of October. This is known as a special provision match. It's really important here to remember that during a base year in one of these provision schools, the students are being directly certified by the SNAP records and are reported on the FNS-742 in box 3-2B. It'd be in data element 1 in a base year. In non-base year provision schools, they go into the FNS-834 data element 3. For students enrolled in a CEP school, there's 3 options of the data to report for data element number 3. We're going to cover those. And just to clarify, remember that there is no base year in CEP schools, so this data will always be reported on the 834. Okay, so option 1 for CEP schools and what to report in data element 3. It's actually the same as A on the previous slide. They perform the special provision match of October data. There's an example here in school year 15-16. The count of data element 3 would come from the special provision match conducted in or near October 2015, but not later than the last operating day of 2015. And that number of students would go into data element number 3, along with any other provision students you have. CEP data option number 2 for reporting on the FNS-834. For CEP schools, you can report the count of identified students matched with SNAP when you're determining your CE community eligibility claiming percentage for that school year. So this example is if we are in the current year is school year 15-16, and the first year of your 4-year cycle was school year 12-13. Then the count used in lieu of the special provision match for data element 3 in school year 15-16 is the count of identified students matched by SNAP by April 1st, 2012. That's your second option on how to count your CEP students and add them to data element number 3. The third option for CEP schools is to report the count of identified students matched with SNAP conducted by April 1st of the same calendar year in which the FNS-834 is due. Whether or not you use that match, it doesn't matter for your claiming percentages. But you can enter that result in data element number 3. So for example, in school year 15-16, The FNS-834 will be due December 1st, all things going well, and the count used in lieu of the special provision match for Data Element 3 for CEP schools for school year 15-16 would be the count of identified students matched by SNAP by April 1st, 2015, whether or not the school is electing to update their claiming percentages for that year. So what does this look like? This is what the FNS-834 looks like in FIPPers. The top information is auto-populated up next to the orange box where it says FNS-834 and FIPPers. That information will be auto-populated. The state agency fills in the contact information, the big gray box, and each state agency, the SNAP and the CN state agency, enter in their individual data. Each agency will only be able to enter their specific data. That is, the SNAP will only be able to fill in data element 2, where the SNAP box is, the big green box, and NSLP will only be able to fill in data element number 3, where the yellow box is. The other agency information will not be visible in Submission Studio, so when you're filling this in, you will not see the SNAP data number listed there, and you will not be able to access it or enter anything into it. And on the bottom, you will see the special circumstance box, which you can put an X in. And here, if you want to, you can enter any remarks you want, and to find the remarks piece, you want to go up to the top left where I circled it in turquoise, remarks, and you click on that tab and enter any remarks that you'd like to share about what your special circumstance is regarding your data element. Enter it there. Okay, so data element number 2, you remember, is the SNAP data. That's the SNAP universe that they report on their SNAP op FNS-834. So now, NSLP state agency staff that have access to enter, certify their data in FIPPers have been granted automatic access to view the SNAP data in FIPPers. Also, the FNS regional office staff who post the CN FNS-834 have automatic access to view the SNAP data in FIPPers. I want to please note here that this new feature means that the SNAP state agency will no longer be required to send the FNS-834 results to the SNAP state agency, to the NSLP state agency. It's expected that the NSLP state agency will use these viewing privileges to obtain the SNAP results. I'm going to show you how to do that. Pretty quick and easy. So I want to stress that this is view-only access. You will not be able to change it or enter it or certify it or post it or do anything. You can only view the results from the SNAP FNS-834. So here are a list of the steps that you have to do, but I'm going to show you next the screenshot of what it looks like and walk through the steps. And as Heather said earlier, these slides will all be available, so you'll be able to access the steps again. They'll be posted within a week or two. So here's steps 1 through 8 in FIPPers, view only. First thing you want to do is go to the top bar. These are highlighted where it says online forms. You click on that. The lower bar will appear. You click on search. And in the search screen, under program, there's a drop-down box, and you want to pick the SNAP Operations Project. The form is the FNS-834. The location would be your state. The time range, as I mentioned earlier, is fiscal year 14 for this year's report. Remember, SNAP is reporting July, August, September data. So that's fiscal year 14 data. Once you fill in those drop boxes, you go to the List button, which is circled here on the left-hand side, and your search results should come up, as I have here for Illinois. This is in certified status, not complete yet, but once it is, you will be able to press on the Select button, which is in the far right corner, highlighted yellow, and that will show you the results of your SNAP data of the universe that the SNAP state agency has submitted of children ages 5 to 17 in a household receiving SNAP benefits during July, August, or September of that year. Okay, so now we know what the data elements are, the 3 essential elements for calculating your rate. Here's a little summary. The FNS-742, line 3-2B, are the students that are directly certified with SNAP. That's due in FIPPers, March 15th, reflective of the October data. Data element number 2 is the SNAP OP FNS-834, the school-age children in SNAP households, due in FIPPers December 1st, theoretically, this year due March 1st, and that's reflective of July, August, September data. And the third data element is the CN FNS-834. That's the SNAP students in non-base year special provision schools and CEP. That's due in FIPPers December 1st, theoretically. This year due March 1st in FIPPers. And remember the data, you have options here on which data you want to include for your CEP schools. For non-base year special provision schools, you are still using your October matches. For CEP, you have those 3 options. And Heather's going to talk about some resources that are available, and in those resources, there's memos that have all the options and things like that are spoken to in those resources, as well as you'll have access to these slides coming up. So I think that's all I have to cover right now, and Heather is going to let you know about the resources, and we'll be looking at the questions that were submitted. Thanks, Ann. So before we move on to Q&As, let's take a look at the resources. As Ann mentioned, the reporting resources listed on this slide provide guidance on completing both the 742 and 834 forms. There are a couple of policy memos listed on this slide, and it's also discussed in the eligibility manual. You can also get help using the emails or toll-free number at the bottom of the slide. If you need help with the actual forms and the content, you can email the state systems email address you see there. If you need help with FIPPers, you can email the FIPPers address or call the toll-free number listed on the slide. This next slide lists our community eligibility website, where you'll find several resources, including recordings of this and future webinars. So now if you'll just give us a moment, we'll take a look at some of the questions that have come in throughout the webinar and take a stab at answering those. Hi, so this is Ann, and one of the first questions we have pertains to something that Joe was talking about earlier, and the question is, are we saying that each state decides the age range of the DHS SNAP universe? And yes, as far as your matching data for the state agency, you can pull down children from age 2 to 20 if you want to do your matches and match against that data, the SNAP data from the SNAP universe. However, for your reporting purposes, what the SNAP State Agency reports on the FNS-834 are only school-age students 5 to 17, so we've tightened up that parameter. Your universe is smaller, but you should be matching against whatever range you think is most practical for your school. So the second question that came in wants to know where Joe's really popular Meal to Match newsletter is available. And that, I believe, is distributed on PartnerWeb, and Joe may have it posted other places. Joe, are you there?
Yeah, it's on PartnerWeb underneath the direct certification
Okay.
folder. So there should be, if you get the PartnerWeb blasts, it'll come out, and I think the last one would have come out on December 31st, would have been the most recent one. But I can also send, if you're unable to find them, I can send all the back issues as well on an email.
Okay, super. So we're going to read a couple more and be right back with you. The next question, a series of questions. The first question is, when will all states be able to use Medicaid data for direct certification? Right now, that's only available in states that are participating in the pilot project with Medicaid and direct certification. Yeah, not expected to expand at this point. Next part of this question is about the requirement to conduct direct certification when a district is CEP system-wide. LEAs are required to run direct certification matches at least 3 times a year, and CEP doesn't change that requirement, and that is basically to help meet the direct certification benchmarks, even though it might not change the claiming percentage. And also, when students are directly certified and they move between schools, students do have the carryover eligibility, and so that helps increase student access to meals also. Next question is about a relationship between the 640 form and the 742 and 834 forms. The 640 form is a report of administrative review findings, and there's not a relationship between those forms. No, the 742 is your verification data, and the 834 is your direct certification data element. So they don't really replace each other. Or I mean, during an administrative review, a state reviewer would be ensuring that the proper procedures were followed for collecting the information and submitting those forms, but that's the only relationship. Okay, so the next question is, because CEP only operated this school year, 2014-15, and this is the base year, is the number 0 reported under data element 3? And no, CEP does not have a base year, so you're going to put the number of matches in data element 3, the number of match students enrolled in a CEP school in data element 3. Those do not go on the 742 anywhere, just basically because CEP does not have a base year where the other provisions do. And during those special provisions 2 and 3, during their base year, they do report those numbers on the 742, but CEP would never be reporting those numbers on the 742. Okay, we'll give a minute or two if anybody has any additional questions to type in before we conclude. Okay, we do have one more question about the requirement to conduct direct certification and those participating in CEP. And we are pretty clear in our CEP Q&As. It's question number 16 about the requirement to run direct certification matches at least 3 times per year. It's the policy memo is SP21-2014. Sorry, an update, we've updated it. It's SP16-2015. And there's the section on direct certification in there that talks about this. Okay, we don't have any additional questions, so we'll go ahead and conclude. Again, if any questions come up, please feel free to contact us. And just to let you know before we sign off, we have a couple future CEP webinars, so we hope you can join us for those. Next week we'll be talking about publication notification requirements. This is another webinar for state agencies. And then on Wednesday the 18th we'll be talking about CEP financials for both state agencies and school districts. And that connection info will be coming out on PartnerWeb. We hope you can join us. Thank you.